Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SAREUM Holdings PLC AGM presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Tim Mitchell, CEO, John Reader, CSO, Clive Birch, NED, and Stephen Parker, Non-Exec Chairman of SAREUM Holdings PLC. Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to the Annual General Meeting of SAREUM Holdings PLC. I am Stephen Parker, Chairman of the Board. A quorum, being 2 members, is present, and therefore we may now proceed with the business of the meeting. Because of the extraordinary times that we are living in, we are unable to interact with shareholders in the usual manner of our annual general meetings. I will therefore read through the resolutions together with the votes received, and then provide the opportunity to shareholders to post questions on the IMC site, which directors will endeavour to answer during the meeting. Any answers which we have been unable to provide immediately will be posted on the company's website within the next few days. I would now like to introduce the board. We have present in the room, we have Dr. Tim Mitchell, CEO, Dr. John Reader, CSO, Clive Birch, Non-Exec Director and Chair of the Audit Committee. On the line is Dr. Mike Owen, who is a Non-Exec Director and Chair of the Remuneration Committee, and we're also joined by Tony Bunn, Company Secretary. I would now like to start the formal proceedings of this Annual General Meeting. The notice of Annual General Meeting was posted to shareholders on the 18th of November 2020. Accordingly, the requisite notice of the Annual General Meeting has been given. I propose, therefore, that the notice of the Annual General Meeting should be taken as read. Before proceeding with the formal business of this meeting, I will now read a statement which was issued to the market this morning. The past year has been a challenging period for many people and companies. We are, however, pleased to report that SAREUM has adapted well to the new working conditions and constraints imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The company has made good further progress and has seized an opportunity to obtain government funding to investigate one of its drug candidates as a potential treatment for COVID-19. Our key focus remains on advancing the development of our 2 TYK2/JAK1 programs, namely SDC-1801, targeting autoimmune diseases, and SDC-1802, targeting cancer. For SDC-1801, which is our near-term focus, we conducted and completed initial toxicology studies in rodents, demonstrating excellent tolerability and established its manufacturing process. In recent months, we developed a new formulation specifically designed to deliver higher exposure levels of the molecule, which we are now testing in additional toxicology studies with a targeted completion date early in the new year. Data from these studies will form part of the planned clinical trial application, which we aim to submit in the first quarter of 2021, and if approved, would allow the start of clinical studies with SDC-1801. This would clearly be an important milestone for the company. In addition, in December 2020, we were granted £174,000 by the UK Research and Innovation to investigate the therapeutic potential of SDC-1801 in severe phase COVID-19. The project began immediately and is expected to take approximately 6 months to complete. Our aim is to investigate whether treatment of cells infected with SARS-CoV-2 with SDC-1801 can block the overactive inflammatory response known as a cytokine storm, which can become life-threatening for patients. The scientific rationale for this project received a significant boost by data published this week in Nature in Nature of DNA studies from severe COVID-19 patients that indicated TYK2 to be a key gene involved in causing the cytokine storm that leads to progression of severe disease in patients. Our project will also investigate if treatment with SDC-1801 in disease models can re-establish protection against bacterial pneumonia following SARS-CoV-2 infection. Positive results from these studies may also highlight the broader potential for SDC-1801 as a treatment for severe and life-threatening inflammation that can occur with other viral infections. We look forward to reporting the outcome of these initial studies in the second half of 2021. With regards to our second TYK2/JAK1 inhibitor candidate, SDC-1802, formulation work for oral dosing was completed during the year, and toxicology studies and further manufacturing work continue. During the year, SAREUM presented new findings showing that SDC-1802, dosed orally as a monotherapy and in combination with chemotherapy, significantly reduced tumor growth in models of solid tumors and blood cancers. This adds to the growing evidence for the potential of SDC-1802 in cancer, and we continue to progress its development behind SDC-1801. Turning to our license programs, in March 2020, we announced a global licensing deal for our FLT3 aurora kinase inhibitor targeting blood cancers with a China-based specialty pharmaceutical company. SAREUM received an upfront payment and is eligible to receive an additional approximately £900,000 dependent on certain milestones being achieved by 2021, and the company will provide an update in this regard in due course. SAREUM is also eligible to receive a further development-based milestone and revenues upon the commercialization of any products resulting from the agreement. Development of our licensed CHEK1 inhibitor, SRA737, over the past 18 months has been frustrating for the board. This is because, following the presentation of promising data from its phase 1/2 trials in June 2019, the license holder, Sierra Oncology, put further SRA737 development on hold while it explored options to fund this development. In November 2020, Sierra and the CRT Pioneer Fund agreed an amendment to the license agreement that reduces the aggregate outstanding milestones from up to $319.5 million to up to $290.0 million, including a milestone payment of $2 million upon the dosing of the first patient in the next clinical trial of SRA737. SAREUM continues to be eligible for 27.5% of the economics of the CRT license agreement as amended, and while the aggregate level of milestone payments is reduced, we are confident that this amendment will expedite the SRA737 program advancing in a more timely manner. We continue to believe that, based on preclinical and early clinical data, SRA737 holds great promise for the treatment of cancer, particularly in combination with existing treatments. We will provide further updates on progress as and when Sierra make further disclosures in relation to the development of SRA737. Turning to business development, which is critical to the company's strategy of partnering its assets at late preclinical or early clinical stage by balancing the cost versus risk returns implications of its individual programs. The company continues to actively engage with potential partners with a view to securing commercial licenses for its TYK2/JAK1 program. We will, as usual, keep shareholders updated in this regard as appropriate. In its fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020, SAREUM reported a loss after tax of £0.99 million versus a loss of £1.45 million in 2019. Cash at the period end was £1.8 million versus £1.0 million as of 31st of December 2019 and £0.2 million as of 30th of June 2019, reflecting the company's careful management of its cash resources, including the voluntary salary deferral scheme entered by all directors in December 2019 and updated in July 2020. In June 2020, the company successfully raised £1.02 million in gross proceeds through a placing by Hybridan in conjunction with an offer via primary bid, and received an R&D tax credit of £0.23 million in January 2020. These proceeds are enabling SAREUM to progress further its TYK2/JAK1 drug development programs, as well as providing support for working capital purposes. The board continues to actively monitor the working capital position of the company and has taken steps to maximize the cash runway to ensure that the two TYK2/JAK1 compounds are prioritized and adequately resourced. In summary, the board believes that against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, SAREUM has made good further progress with its proprietary TYK2/JAK1 programs. We now have the exciting prospect of submitting our first CTA approval in the first quarter of 2021, a key step in allowing the first in-human studies with SDC-1801 to begin. In addition, we have executed an an out-licensing deal for our FLT3 Aurora kinase inhibitor. We also recognise that the recently amended deal between Sierra and CPF on SRA737 is a key step in restarting the clinical advancement of this promising asset. In this year, more than any other, I would like to thank our shareholders, suppliers, contractors, and other stakeholders for their continued support, and look forward to providing further updates on progress as we move forward in 2021. Before we turn to the resolutions, I would like to say a few words about the procedure, as this will necessarily differ from previous years. I will propose each resolution in turn, having briefly summarised its content, and I will then read the result of the votes received. The directors will not answer questions relating to the individual rights of shareholders. Any shareholder who wishes to raise such a question should communicate with me or Dr. Mitchell by email following the meeting. I shall move on to the formal business of the meeting and will now recite the resolutions. The full text of each of the resolutions is set out in the notice of annual general meeting, a copy of which is on the company's website. We will also put it up as slides as we go through. Resolutions 1 to 6 were proposed as ordinary resolutions, each requiring a simple majority of the votes cast to be in favour in order to be passed. Resolution 7 was proposed as a special resolution requiring a majority of 75% of votes cast to be in favour in order to be passed. Each resolution received a total of 236,933,730 votes, which represents 7.25% of the total shares outstanding. Resolution 1. I propose Resolution 1 in the notice of annual general meeting as an ordinary resolution to receive and adopt the report of the directors and financial statements for the financial year ended 30th of June 2020. Proxy votes have been received as follows. In favour, 236,539,335. None in discretion. Against, 76,912. And withheld, 317,483. I thus declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Resolution 2. Proposed Resolution 2 in the Notice of Annual General Meeting as an ordinary resolution to receive and adopt the Remuneration Committee report for the year ended the 30th of June 2020. Votes have been received as follows. In favour, 225,264,050. Against, 2,946,682. And withheld, 8,722,998. I thus declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Resolution 3 in the Notice of Annual General Meeting is for the re-election of myself, retiring by rotation under Sections 76 and 77 of the Articles of Association, and who, being eligible, offers myself for re-election as a director. Votes have been received as follows. In favour, 225,888,456. Against, 10,980,647. Withheld, 64,627. I thus declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Resolution 4 in the Notice of Annual General Meeting is for the re-election of Dr. Tim Mitchell, who retires by rotation under Sections 76 and 77 of the Articles of Association, and being eligible offers himself for re-election as a director. Votes have been received as follows. In favour, 236,331,048. Against, 538,055. Withheld, 64,627. I thus declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Resolution 5 of the Notice of Annual General Meeting is to confirm the appointment of Shipley's LLP as auditor of the company to hold office until the conclusion of the next AGM, at which accounts are laid before the company, and to authorise the directors to fix its remuneration. Votes have been received as follows. 236,450,012. Against, 433,718. None withheld. I thus declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Resolution I propose Resolution 6 in the notice of annual general meeting as an ordinary resolution that the directors be and that they are generally and unconditionally authorised for the purposes of Section 551 of the Companies Act 2006 to exercise all the powers of the company to allot shares in the company and to grant rights to subscribe for or convert any security into shares in the company up to, in the capital of the company, up to an aggregate nominal amount of £816,930, provided that this authority is for a period expiring at the conclusion of the company's next annual general meeting, but the company may, before such expiry, make an offer or agreement which would or might require shares to be allotted in such rights to be granted after such expiry, and the directors may allot shares and grant such rights in pursuance of such offer or agreement, notwithstanding that the authority conferred by this resolution has expired. This authority is in substitution of all earlier authorities to the extent unused. Votes have been received as follows. In favour, 229,589,440. Against, 7,026,807. Withheld, 317,483. I thus declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Resolution 7. Given the passing of Resolution 6, I propose Resolution 7 in the notice of annual general meeting as a special resolution that the directors be and that they are empowered in accordance with Section 570 of the Act to allot equity securities as defined in Section 560 of the Act, wholly for cash pursuant to the authority conferred by the previous resolution, as if Section 561 of the Act did not apply to any such allotment, provided that this power should be limited to the allotment of equity securities. A, in connection with an offer of such securities by way of rights, open offer or preemptive offer to holders of ordinary shares in proportion or as nearly as may be practical to their respective holdings of such shares, but subject to such exclusions or other agreements as the directors may deem necessary or expedient in relation to fractional entitlements or any legal or practical problems under the laws of any territory or the requirements of any regulatory body or stock exchange. And B, otherwise and pursuant to subparagraph A above, up to an aggregate nominal amount of £816,930, and shall expire on the conclusion of the next annual general meeting of the company after the passing of this resolution, save that the company may, before such expiry, make an offer or agreement which would or might require equity securities to be allotted after such expiry, and the directors may allot equity securities of any such offer or agreement, notwithstanding that the power conferred by this resolution has expired. Votes have been received as follows. In favour, 229,228,970. Discretion, 455, which I will vote in favour. Against, 7,322,195. Withheld, 382,110. I thus declare the resolution carried by the necessary majority. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes all of today's formal business. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank you for your attendance and declare the formal business of the annual general meeting closed. In closing, may I thank you for all your ongoing support during this extraordinary year and express the hope that next year's annual general meeting will be held under more conventional circumstances. I would now like to hand back to our host at IMC, who will take you through the process for any questions you may have.
Fantastic.
Paul?
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Just while the company take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you the recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. Lastly, before I hand back to the SAREUM board, I'd like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after the presentation has ended, you will be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Stephen, before we look at the questions submitted during today's presentations, if I could possibly hand back to you, as we had a number of questions that have been pre-submitted by investors ahead of today's meeting. Would you please be kind enough to read those out and then respond where appropriate to do so?
Yes, I'll recite the questions so everybody knows what's being asked, and then I will then be asking Tim or John to answer them as appropriate. There have been several questions referring to the company's PR approach and activity. I will read one specific question, but we will be effectively covering several of the questions that have been asked in this. Many of our shareholders are concerned about the general lack of PR from the company. There is little or no publicity given to what we have. Please, can you explain the company's philosophy around PR and what the company's strategy is moving forward in this regard? Tim, perhaps you would like to pick that one up.
Steve? So we're satisfied with the level and PR advice we get from CDR and our other advisors, given the fact that we're a small company and that we're a very early stage in our research. Most of the PR work we do is unseen by investors. It's very much on a business-to-business level, but aimed at keeping key commentators and other interested parties informed about our progress. The majority of the progress we've made is not necessarily expected to generate news coverage, as in the dailies or the TV news, given that tends to be larger companies publishing clinical results. And I think particularly at the moment, with all the COVID clinical work going on, it's quite difficult for any smaller preclinical company to get their voices heard. So our focus is still on our 2 lead 2 JAK1 assets. And assuming that we do make successful progress into the clinic, we'd expect that level of media interest to increase.
Thank you. Right. Moving on. Can you keep investors informed more often on what is going on? Maybe updates in website. I'll just pick this one up because I think it's a straightforward answer. We are conscious of keeping investors updated with key events, and indeed, as a public company, have an obligation to do so. The policy is to provide appropriate updates via RNS when there is something to update investors on, and of course, we do have a regular schedule, usually linked to results and this AGM, which provides an opportunity for usually a more interactive session with our investors. One, I think, for John Reader, are you developing anything new or just concentrating on what you've developed so far?
We're focused really on advancing our 2 lead molecules, the development candidates 1801 and 1802, which we think have got a lot of potential across autoimmune diseases in the case of SDC 1801, and potentially for the cytokine storm that can emerge in COVID-19, and then in cancer for 1802. And given that, we have to be careful how we prioritise where we spend the money. So we're hoping that longer term, as the company develops and we'll get in additional financing, we will then be in a position to expand our pipeline beyond our existing assets. But at the moment, the focus is very much on the TYK2 JAK1 assets.
Thank you, John. It's a question regarding the renegotiation of the SRA 737 agreement. I think it's important that I remind you once again that SAREUM is not a party to this agreement in any way, shape or form. This is an agreement which is exclusively conducted between Sierra Oncology as the licensee and the Cancer Pioneer Fund as the licensor. SAREUM's position here is that we have a separate agreement under which we receive 27.5% of the economic benefits of this deal, but we have no voice at the table for either the original negotiation or its renegotiation this year. Do you want to just add anything to to that, Tim?
Yeah, there's a number of specific points in the question, and if the question holder is online, we'll publish the full question when we finish up later. But there's quite a lot of detailed questions. But I think just to cover the main points of that, then, as Steve says, yes, we have no direct influence over the agreement or its renegotiation. But the renegotiated agreement significantly reduces the milestone payment for patients going into the next clinical trials. So I think Sierra and any potential partners they were talking to saw those milestones as a significant financial hurdle to pass as soon as they wanted to progress the program any further. And with Sierra's noted support on their momelotinib phase 3 asset, they were looking for ways to ease their way into clinical trials, whether they did it with their own funding or via a partner. So we can't say when any next trial is likely to happen. We haven't seen sight of a clinical plan. But the early data does look very good, and combined with a reduced milestone obligation, we hope that the program will be advanced sooner rather than later, but we can't put any exact times on that.
Thank you. There's a question here regarding licensing intentions. The Board of Directors has stated on a number of occasions that directors will continue to review the potential higher value of a later stage licensing deal versus the requirement for any additional funding. As recently as the August 2020 trading update, and somewhat tantalizingly, the Board of Directors highlighted a number of licensing deals, noting that license deals significantly increase in value at later development stages. In this context, what precisely are the Board of Directors' intentions regarding the preclinical licensing of STC 1801 and STC 1802 versus early clinical stage licensing? Are you seeking to license one or both assets at the preclinical stage? One for Tim, I think.
I think so. I just lost the... Yes, so as we stated previously, our strategy is to out-license assets at late preclinical or early clinical stages, depending on our consideration of the balance between cost and risk versus returns. So I think we'd look to push the programs as far forward as we thought we reasonably could. But if the right licensing deal came along in the meantime, then obviously we'd want to take that. So our plan is to out-license both STC 1801 and 1802 in line with this strategy in a way that maximises value for the company and its shareholders. So that could be as individual licensing deals or as two separate licensing deals, or we may choose to license one to fund the further development of another. At the moment, we're keeping all options open.
Thank you. Right, I think that concludes the questions which were received in advance of the meeting. There are clearly several have come in during it, which will just, if you forgive us, we will quickly scan through and pick out ones which are distinct from the ones we've already answered.
Stephen, thank you. And I know you haven't had long to review those questions. There's quite a few that have come through. So do please review those. And I'd just like to remind investors as well, the company review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. And again, if I could just ask you to read out the question ahead of answering, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Right, we've effectively the questions are breaking down into several regarding the research program, which John, of course, is the expert in answering, and some others for the general, more general business aspect.
Shall I take some of these, Paul?
Please do.
Steve, sorry, there's a number of questions from Paul that I will try to answer. What can the board tell me about IFNAR2, which was also mentioned in the Nature article? Is this something which signals via JAK1? The answer is yes. So it's the interferon alpha receptor type 2. It signals via both TYK2 and JAK1. Interestingly, it was noted that it was down-regulated in the Nature paper, whereas TYK2 was up-regulated. So that is interesting. Its role in COVID is probably in fighting the viral infection. So this is something we need to be careful of. If we inhibit interferon alpha, that could be a problem, right? We don't want to stop the body's viral defences. So this is why the timing and the research element is critical in this programme, and something we'll be looking at very carefully. There's a question about the government ordering vaccines in advance of it being produced, and do the same opportunities exist for our TYK2 molecule, and do we plan to speak with the UK government? So we are in contact with the UK government via UKRI, and as part of a grant. I don't think there's an opportunity for them to order our molecule in advance, but we can ask them. In any event, we are going to have to go through all of the regulatory processes in order to get the molecule approved. There's a question about the necessity of the study that we've just announced. We're going to carry on the grant-funded study. Is it necessary? Does the paper not tell us everything we need to know about TYK2 inhibition? Unfortunately, the paper has published some very interesting observations, but as the authors note in that paper, their observations are going to need developing in the clinic, and they've proposed a number of molecules which are already on the market, which could be used to address some of those questions. So they specifically, I suppose, the one of interest to us is baricitinib, which is primarily an inhibitor of JAK1 and JAK2, but does have some activity on TYK2. And baricitinib is already in clinical trials for COVID-19. It's on the market as a rheumatoid arthritis treatment. There was some positive data published yesterday or over the weekend about baricitinib in combination with remdesivir. So it looks like there's some traction in the theory, but we are going to have to do our research program to demonstrate that our molecule has a beneficial effect. If it does, we will then take that to ethics committees, regulatory authorities. These people need to see some data before they'll allow you to conduct human clinical trials. So yes, we do have to do our research program. Paul, there's a lot of questions here. We will answer any that I don't answer here. We'll provide a written response to your question, but just a couple more I can pick up on. Does the formulation for 1801 have patent protection, or do we have to submit a new patent application? We get quite a few questions about patents, and all I'll say is we're not going to say. Part of the patent process is when you submit for a patent, you have 18 months confidentiality before your patent is published. And in that time, you can add to the data, you can amend your patent, and it gives you a little bit of protection from the competition so that they can't see exactly what you're doing and try to develop their own programs in competition. So the UK Patent Office is unusual in that it announces that a patent application has been made after about 3 months, and it tells you what the title of that patent is, which is why you'll see patents called pharmaceutical compounds or methods of treating a disease or things like that that give no information away whatsoever. So we, as is right, use that 18-month period of anonymity, if you like, to develop our patents further, which is why we don't really give any information out about patents that are or have recently been applied for. I think the others I'll answer in written responses, Paul.
Thank you, John. There's a couple here regarding the FIT3 Aurora arrangements. The first one, which is I think very easy to deal with. What is the Chinese company name that you are keeping from us? Well, we're bound by confidentiality in the agreement, not to reveal that name at this stage. I'm sure that as soon as the Chinese partner is happy for us to do so, we will be sharing it in public. And how soon can you expect the update from the Chinese partner? Well, the expected timescale comes out to January of next year. We have not heard that there are significant delays arising from COVID, but we must always bear in mind that we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and it is possible that we will be told that reporting has been delayed, but we have not as yet heard that. Tim, is there anything you found there?
No, I think some of them were. There's more questions on PR and the development of 1801, which I think we've answered. There's a question on, yes, do you have adequate funding to continue the work on existing projects? I think at the time of the fundraise we did earlier this year, we said that the funds raised then were enabled us to complete the studies on at least one of the two TYK2 JAK1 programs to get it to a state where we could file for clinical trials approval.
There's a question I can take here. Is the government grant sufficient to continue the necessary studies in 1801, taking it to the next stage? The government grant is sufficient to carry out some cellular assays and some disease model studies that we want to perform. That will be done in parallel with our own development of SDC 1801, and those studies are funded internally.
Good. The question about an update regarding SRA 737, as I said before, of course, this is a matter for Sierra to provide, and we will, of course, ensure that our shareholders are aware of any update that Sierra publishes as soon as they do.
I see one on TYK2 molecules. So how many are currently in progress worldwide? How much competition do we have? So I think we do have some. I think if we were this far into the program and nobody else would do it, was working on in the area, we'd be wondering if we were doing something very strange and very wrong. So I think we're happy to see some competition, but obviously don't want too much. BMS have a molecule in phase 3. That's a pure TYK2 inhibitor, so slightly different to our TYK2 JAK1 profile. They also have a second TYK2 molecule, which we believe is the Nimbus one acquired through the Celgene merger in early phase 1. Pfizer have a TYK2 JAK1 molecule quite similar to ours in a number of phase 2 studies. They also have what they call a TYK2. It looks to us a little bit more like a TYK2 JAK2 molecule, again in early clinical. And there's one or two others around in preclinical. So there is some competition, but we don't think it's too much for us to overcome.
Thank you, Tim. Okay.
There's a question about the critical path to IND. Is there any way to accelerate the start of the studies? So the critical path to IND are the toxicology studies, which are underway. I think we're pretty much there in terms of starting phase 1 once those studies are complete. John, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, there is some additional chemistry requirements. I mean, there is a lot of data that has to be gathered to apply for an IND, but certainly the critical path, as Tim says, are the toxicology studies which are in progress.
There's the question on potential partners for TIC2, and are these global companies? And so I mean, there's pretty much as many potential partners as there are large and medium and potentially even small pharmaceutical companies. So there's a vast number of potential partners, and many of those are global companies. There's a question about approximate value for a TIC2 partnership deal. For that, can I refer you to the presentation that we made with our results statement? We show some example presentation of some example deals in the TIC2 space, both at preclinical, phase 1 and phase 2. So those presentations are on the company's website. If you look at those, that's I suppose a guidelines for the sort of deals that can be done.
I think since some of the other questions are quite complex, we will hold them over and provide answers in the usual way, which will be published on the website in the next few days. So with that, I once again like to thank you all for attending. I'm sorry we're not seeing you in the usual way this year, but hope very much that we can put that right next year. Many thanks, and let me hand you back to Paul for a final wrap-up.
Stephen, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for addressing those investors' questions. And of course, as stated, the company will review all of the questions submitted today and publish responses where appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform, and also as they stated on their website. Tim, perhaps if I could just hand back to you just for a final couple of words before we redirect investors to feedback, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, so I'll reiterate then. Stephen's thanks for everyone for attending. Apologies, as he said, that we can't attend in focus. Hopefully we'll be able to do that next year. We have all the questions here, that they're on the site. We'll work our way through them, and in the next few days we will publish answers to the questions that we can. So say thank you very much for submitting those. We'll get the answers out to you, and we look forward to meeting you in person in a year's time.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much to SAREUM Holdings Board for updating investors today. Could I ask investors not to close the session, as you will now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you access this meeting from our website, the feedback page will appear in front of you. If you've accessed it via the link sent to you in an email, you'll be asked to log in and submit your feedback, which only takes a few seconds and is greatly received by the company. Therefore, on behalf of SAREUM Holdings PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's event. Thank you and good morning.